Hello and welcome to the Scented Chronicles, Unearthing the Rich History of Perfume. Now, don't panic at the word history, because if you're like me, history lessons at school often drifted past me, except when they featured the gory escapades of Henry VIII. Yet the tapestry of perfume's past is utterly captivating, with roots that are far more complex than today's glossy advertisements would suggest. Venture forth to unearth some historical nuggets that are as astonishing as they are authentic. Perfume's chronicle stretches far back, not born of modernism but of antiquity. Indeed, the first form of perfume was incense, made by the Mesopotamians about 4,000 years ago. So wrote Joe Schwartz, PhD, in The Story of Perfume for McGill University's Office for Science and Society, and you can Google that if you want to read more. But in this article, he narrates how ancient civilizations would burn resins and woods in sacred ceremonies, a tradition that migrated to Egypt around 3000 BC. Initially reserved for religious rites, perfumes became a societal staple as Egyptian priests eased their exclusive hold, allowing the masses to indulge in scented baths and oil-soaked skin for sheer pleasure. These early essences were crafted by steeping oils and fats with an assortment of plant parts, spices and resins, similar to brewing tea, allowing the oils to absorb the aromatic essence from the materials. In fact, even ancient Egyptian murals and scripts reveal that they adorned themselves with perfumed cones on their heads, initially believed to be made of solidified scented fats and oils embedded with nature's finest fragrance, such as jasmine and rose. Worn like regal diadems, they would melt under the desert sun, coating the wearers in a fragrant film, simultaneously moisturizing their skin and shielding them from the sun's severity. Apparently, the ancient Egyptians loved to party, so it's likely that they wore the perfumed head cones as accessories to impress other revellers and flaunt their high status within the hierarchy of their society. Nicola Harrington, an archaeologist at the University of Sydney, theorised that some of the lower class women who wore head cones might have been dancers, as the injuries found in their bones match the injuries of today's dancers. Her findings were discussed in a National Geographic article entitled "Ancient Egyptian Head Cone Mystery Solved by Archaeologists." The article states, perhaps the cones marked dancers or members of a community that served the gods. That could explain why these people were buried with the cones despite their basic burials. However, the article also quotes archaeologist Anna Stevens from Monash University, who says, without more archaeological evidence, there's no way to know how the cones were really used or if they were used more widely. Unfortunately, we may never find out. It's also important to note that recent findings led by Stevens negate the fragrant fat theory. The cones weren't solid, they were hollow shells, folded around brownish black organic matter, thought to be fabric and beeswax. The ancient Egyptians traditionally used scent not only to anoint themselves, but since they associated fragrance with superior powers and immortality, they would burn incense and dried plant material as offerings to appease their deities. And they also used fragrance during the mummification process and funeral rituals. They even wore fragrant flower garlands in life and in death. Egyptologists have discovered fragrance jugs in tombs in Egypt, proving that scent was held in high regard. Infused ground and burned plants and resins became an important part of their own beauty treatments and scent rituals. And we can learn how they did this by examining a 3,500-year-old 19-metre scroll, I kid you not, which shows how the ancient Egyptians produced perfumes, cosmetics, ointments, and balms. It's the world's longest, only complete, and best preserved papyrus scroll devoted to ancient Egyptian medicine. And it was acquired in Luxor by George Ebers, an Egyptologist from Leipzig, who produced a printed facsimile of it for research in 1875. And if you are in Germany, take a trip to the Leipzig University Library, apologies if I pronounced it wrong, and you can view this replica on permanent display inside its own separate showroom in the foyer of Bibliotheca Albertina. Our knowledge and understanding of the past is still evolving. Let's look now to Cleopatra, the illustrious Queen of Egypt for 22 years. But she was not only a ruler, but also a connoisseur of perfumes and lavish beauty rituals. She operated her own perfumery, concocting personal fragrances from materials such as frankincense, myrrh, roses, and a melange of herbs and spices. In those times, the modern method of steam distillation for oil extraction was unheard of. Instead, aromatic materials were infused into fats and oils. Shakespeare, in his poetic brilliance, once wrote, "Purple the sails and so perfumed that the winds were lovesick with them." Cleopatra's legend tells of her perfuming the sails of her ships so intensely that her lover, Mark Antony, would be greeted by her signature scent even before her arrival was visible. This tale inspires a romantic notion. In our digital era where handwritten letters are rare, imagine using fragrance as a personal hallmark, and each time you send a card or a letter, its unique scent could signal its origin from you, adding a touch of romance and personal flair. So there you go. Why don't you try it? Imbue your letters and greeting cards with your favourite fragrance. Place your greeting cards, postcards, writing papers, and envelopes into a small drawer. Spritz some of your favourite perfume or sprinkle a few drops of your favourite essential oil onto a clean cotton pad and place it in the drawer. Be careful not to touch any of the paper or cards with the scented cotton pad or it will leave a stain. And then just simply close the drawer and leave it for a few days or weeks until your items have been infused with the beautiful scent that you've chosen. The longer you leave it in the drawer, the stronger the scent will be. How romantic and cheering is that? Writing a letter so that the recipient knows it's from you before they've even opened it, because a familiar fragrance will become your signature scent. So come on, brighten up someone's day and leave a piece of your personality on paper. But moreover, about Cleopatra, she was famed for her radiant skin, often bathing in arse's milk or donkey's milk. And this practice, the milk is actually rich in lactic acid, which aids in exfoliation and skin rejuvenation. It helps to speed up your skin, you see. Every 28 days, the cells renew itself and renew themselves. And that's why people love to use yogurt, face masks, or even soak their feet in a bowl of warm milk, because the lactic acid helps with this exfoliation process and it can leave your skin glowing. Which just goes to show that Cleopatra's timeless beauty rituals continue to inspire even today. And you can try that yourself. You can warm a couple of pints of full fat milk gently on the stove, pour the milk into a large bowl big enough to fit both your feet, test the temperature because you don't want to burn your little pinkies, and then place the bowl on the floor and soak your bare feet in the milk for about 20 to 30 minutes. I don't know about you, but the heels on my feet are absolutely atrocious. I think I'm going to be doing this later on today. And then once they're dry, I'm going to be putting some shea butter on my cracked and dry heels. But once you've done this, you can put some oil or some shea butter on your feet and then put some socks on. And this is, if this helps the oil or the butter that you have on your feet, helps it to absorb, but it also makes sure that you don't slip on the floor, especially if you've got tiled or wooden floors like I do. And by doing this, you'll have an inkling as to how Cleopatra liked to pamper herself with natural materials. But let's move on to the 3rd century. The Roman Emperor Heliogabalus, who reigned from 218 to 222, left an indelible mark on history with his notoriously extravagant and debauched lifestyle. His reign, though brief, was marked by extreme excesses. According to Historia Augusta, Emperor Heliogabalus used violets and other flowers to suffocate his dinner guests. Imagine. The Roses of Heliogabalus, a painting by Sir Lawrence Alma Tadema, depicts an infamous party scene hosted by the emperor. In this picture, it depicts the Roman emperor laying nonchalantly as he drinks his wine and observes as his guests below are smothered to death by rose petals. This is the ultimate party prank. This is the ultimate Roman death. And during the late Victorian era, when Alma Tadema painted the roses of Heliogabalus, roses represented lust and desire in the Victorian language of flowers known as floriography. According to the original source, Historia Augusta, the emperor used violets and other flowers to suffocate his dinner guests. However, Sir Lawrence uses roses as his method of death because roses were a more appropriate flower for him to paint because violets represented faithfulness and modesty in the Victorian floriography. And Emperor Heliogabalus was many things, but he certainly was not faithful and modest. If this subject fascinates you, then you might consider getting your hands on a copy of The Mad Emperor, Heliogabalus and the Decadence of Rome by Harry Sidebottom. Let's fast forward now to the 9th century Arab world, where the eminent Arab physician Avicenna refined the distillation process significantly, a method that would remain the gold standard for more than 2 centuries. And this advancement made it possible to now extract those aromatic essences from plants effectively, revolutionizing the use of oils in perfumery. In 15th century France, King Louis XIV, also known as the Sun King, oversaw an era of extraordinary affluence in France, and his demand for grandeur extended to his olfactory preferences, commissioning a unique fragrance for every day of the week to adorn his majestic palace. Let's flip now to the 16th century. Contrary to popular belief, the art of perfumery did not begin in France. It originated in Italy and was brought to France in 1533 by Catherine de' Medici and her personal perfumer, René Le Florentin, formerly Bianco. René was abandoned at a monastery, and the monks who adopted him taught him the art of perfumery. Legend has it René made perfumes and poisons for Catherine. The poison potions were used as Catherine's preferred method of revenge against her enemies. However, there is no concrete evidence to support these claims, but it makes for a gory story. The 16th century was a significant period in the development of perfumery in Italy, as it marked the emergence of the industry as a highly specialised and artistic field. The knowledge and techniques developed during this time continue to influence perfumery still to this day. Catherine de' Medici, I call her de' Medici, and my friend Layla in Norway, she's Melanie, it's Demici. I'm like, okay. So Catherine de' Medici was also known for her vast collection of perfumes, which she kept in her personal perfumery at the palace. Let me put my teeth back in. At the palace of Fontainebleau. She is said to have had over 800 different perfumes and scented oils, and would often give them as gifts to visiting dignitaries and courtiers. Catherine played a key role in promoting perfumery in France. She was actually a patron of perfumers and helped to establish the first guild of perfumers in France, which was responsible for setting standards for the quality of perfumes. Now there's a book that I found in a serendipitous find in a French second-hand bookstore where I was visiting my auntie. 4 hours north of where I live, there was a very rare book that contained modern replicas of Renée's formulas. I was thrilled to find this book, and it was a snip at just €20. I think if you find these online, they're quite rare, and they're going for probably around €80 to €100. So keep your eyes out. Keep your eyes peeled when you go to France in these second-hand bookshops for books with his name on, René Le Florentin. Now, these days, I'm not a fan of fiction books. I prefer to read non-fiction, especially about my industry. But I did come, whilst researching perfume books online at Abe Books, I came across a book, and it was called The Collector of Dying Breaths by M.J. Rose, and it's fascinating. And in the words of Simon and Schuster, the publisher of the book, they say that the fiction novel is a fascinating Gothic tale which zigzags from the violent days of Catherine de' Medici's court to 21st century France and features René Le Florentin, who may have been working on an elixir that would unlock the secret to immortality. So I urge you, if this subject fascinates you, then go ahead and do some research and Google it. As I'm always telling my niece in Australia, if you can't find it, Google it. The Collector of Dying Breaths by M.J. Rose. It's a fascinating book. In 18th century France, Marie Antoinette, known for her lavish lifestyle, had her own personal perfumer, Jean-Louis Fargeon. He created her signature scent, Perfume de Trianon, named after her beloved Petit Trianon. Her passion for perfumes was so great that it reportedly played a part in her undoing when she was caught trying to flee France with her collection of perfumes. Such was her love for fragrance that it's rumoured that she tried to pack all of her perfumes whilst attempting to flee France. So basically they were coming for her and she knew they were going to capture her, but she thought it more important and pertinent to pack her perfumes in her suitcase so that she could flee with all her fragrances. But they caught her, and this was during the Revolution, and she was imprisoned before she could escape and was later executed by beheading. So that really is someone who is passionate about perfume, taking that to the extreme. In the Victorian era, societal norms dictated that, quote, respectable girls should smell of gentle floral notes, whilst stronger scents were deemed inappropriate and were for associated with women of ill repute. Perfumes were made from natural materials, but that would soon change with the discovery of synthetic materials. Yes, the advent of synthetic materials was just on the horizon. But interestingly, in those days, perfumes were initially always gender neutral, with men and women sharing the same floral fragrances. In fact, even today, I have many male friends that love to wear feminine floral fragrances and a lot of women that love to wear masculine fragrances. So in the Victorian era and before that, the concept of distinct male and female scents was not applicable then. That is a modern invention, propelled by marketing strategies, of course, because who buys the most fragrance? Women. Today, though, we're seeing a resurgence of genderless perfumes, returning to the roots of fragrance without distinction. We're almost at the end of this part 1 of the Scented Chronicles, but let's skip forward now to the 19th century, where the discovery of synthetic materials meant that perfumes finally became more affordable, as some of the world's most expensive oils could be replaced with cheaper counterparts and smell almost as decent, although less complex. So materials like coumarin is a substitute for the very expensive tonka bean, and vanillin is another substitute for vanilla, which is exorbitant. Guerlain was one of the very first fragrance houses to incorporate coumarin and vanillin, which were substitutes for tonka bean and vanilla, in perfumes. And I just got a beautiful quote here, who is now Thierry Vasseur, who is the chief perfumer at Guerlain, and the first perfumer who actually came from outside of the family. And he quotes, "The philosophy in Guerlain is very simple. Make beautiful products, have simple ideas, and never, ever compromise the quality." But if we look quite briefly at the establishment of Grasse in France, the establishment of perfumery, rather, in Grasse became central to the perfumery industry in the 19th century. And perfumery actually took over from their once thriving trade of tanning leather, which was a foul-smelling process. And they perfumed these gloves to cover the stench. But then they started profiting from a solution to their own problem. So today we know Grasse as the city of flowers. They no longer tan leather, but their perfume industry is absolutely thriving. So they went from tanning leather gloves, and when people say, "Oh, it's a beautiful leather scent," it doesn't have leather, because if you've ever really smelt real leather, it's absolutely foul, and that's why they used fragrances for the gloves to get rid of this smell. But Grasse, if you've never been to Grasse, it's a must visit for scent enthusiasts, at least once in a lifetime. I've been a few times. Many of the finest perfume houses and raw material manufacturers have their headquarters in and around Grasse, and they supply some of the most luxurious brands in the world. In fact, you can look at Fragonard and Molinard, two historical houses there that offer perfume making classes. And you can do a little free tour, which takes about 45 minutes. It's fascinating. And here you can discover the history of fragrance, you can learn the basics of perfumery, and you can even, if you take one of the classes, create a personalised scent to take home. Now, I have been to Molinard and Fragonard, amazing, fascinating places, and I've done the free tours that they have there. Fragonard, more than Molinard, seems to be very pushy at the end of the tour, trying to get you to buy their products. And I just, at the end of it, I got a bit sick of the sales spiel and basically said, "Okay, so can I go now?" She's like, "Yes, okay." And she didn't look very happy. But anyway, I left because I'm more of a fan anyway of natural fragrances. But I did buy a bag, but I bought it from one of the boutiques outside. I actually wanted one at this time. This was 2023 in June. I went and they had the Narcissus, which is an incredible fragrance. And every year Fragonard celebrate a different raw material. One year it might be iris, the next it might be jasmine, but this year it was Narcissus. And I wanted the Narcissus bag. And the Fragonard bags are just beautiful. You can use them for shopping, etc. And they're absolutely stunning and very colourful. And I collect them, but I wanted the Narcissus one, but I wasn't allowed to buy it for €10 because I had to buy perfumed products worth €150. And I was like, no thanks. When someone's fed up with their Narcissus bag, I'm sure I'll be able to find it on Etsy. But yeah, they offer these free tours. Really fascinating they are. They offer them in French and in English. So just pop along. I just popped along one morning and said, when is the next one? And they said it's starting right now. So I was very lucky. But next to Fragonard is the International Perfumery Museum, and it's fascinating, and it showcases some of the rarest and oldest perfume artifacts in the world. In fact, I think I almost nearly got thrown out of there for taking too many photographs, and they're strict in some regards in that they don't like you to take videos, but certainly I took probably 1,000 photographs of the fragrances that are showcased there, and it's a fascinating place. It's an absolute must visit if you're in Grasse, and schedule in perhaps a full morning or a full afternoon. And if you buy a ticket in the morning, you can actually leave at lunchtime. You can go to one of the cafes around the corner, and then you can go back in the afternoon with the same ticket. So you don't have to pay twice. And they even have gardens like halfway before you get to where all of the fragrances are showcased. Because they have a little garden where you can see patchouli and rosemary and thyme and lots of other actual raw materials in their plant form, and a journey through history, etc. They've got some gardens before you get to the perfume showcase, and I basically went across the road. I got myself a soft drink and a baguette and a beautiful cheese and ham sandwich, and I had that in my bag, and halfway through I went into the gardens that they have just before you reach the perfume showcases, and you actually have to go through the garden to get to where all the perfumes are. So I just sat there. It was a beautiful day. The birds were singing. There's tables and chairs, and yeah, you can just sit there with your baguette and your drink. You can even buy little bottles of rosé if that's what you fancy. So yeah, absolutely the first stop. If you're only there for one day and you only do one thing, go to the International Perfumery Museum. And it's not even that much to enter. So that's it for part 1 of the Scented Chronicles. I hope you enjoyed that. The next part, which is it's just a 2-part, so the second part is going to be about the 20th century, and we're going to be talking about iconic fragrances. Starting with Coty in 1905. So I hope to see you on the other side in the next episode. Take care. A bientôt.